Thank you very much for coming out. This should take about 30 or 40 minutes, and we'll have 10 or 15, hopefully, for some questions. I'm sure it'll raise all kinds of interesting questions. I title it Boom because at the end, kind of the last 15 to 20 minutes, I get to talk about all the cool things that have come out of different tech shops across the US. And you want to be able to participate at that point because some of them are quite inspiring. And being a former Green Beret, I love blowing things up. And I believe we're in the middle of a revolution. It truly is. I believe it's going to be as large, if not larger, than the first and the second industrial revolution. And I've got other folks that certainly agree. It's blowing up business models. It is the gale force winds, as Schumpeter says, of creative destruction. But the cool thing is it's really enabling an entire new generation of makers and creators and folks to participate in very exciting ways. So I want to ask you to say boom on occasion, and so I'll cue you up. I'll go 1, 2, 3, and then you'll all scream boom, because trust me, you are going to want to participate. I've done this a number of times, and it turns into the highlight, good or bad news, the highlight of the entire presentation. So here we go. And by the way, if you're on the YouTube, yes, I do expect you to do the same thing. Shout boom as loud as you possibly can. Scare the cat and the dog and your spouse. So 1, 2, 3, boom. That's pretty good. Let's do it. I like this. Let's do it one more time. 1, 2, 3, boom. Now we're talking. All right. So, as I mentioned, I do believe it's a revolution. I've written a book. There's a reason I call it the manifesto, because every revolution needs a manifesto, and it talks a little bit about the gestalt of the maker movement and so forth. And my publisher insists that I always show this slide, so please buy it early, buy it often. I need 5 stars, by the way. The 4-star thing on Amazon is not helping me, and I had one guy give me 1 star, but I don't know what his problem was. So the cool thing is the maker movement is now about 10 years old. I still believe we're in the very early stages of its impact. It started with Make Magazine in 2006. They started doing, 2004. They started doing the maker fairs in 2006. And we now have the President of the United States is shining lights on this. We had the first maker fair at the White House 2 years ago. They did a follow-up one this year. And it's very exciting to see this kind of level of interest in the movement in general. I think you're going to see it continue to steamroll because it is, and we'll get through that. It is going to continue to steamroll. It will get more press and so forth. And you need to participate. This is a participatory revolution, and you need to make something for someone, give it away, and evaluate how that feels. And it's really easy to make these days relative to what it used to be, and it will become kind of the norm, I believe. So I'm going to talk about TechShop because that's my experience base, and we've got 8 of them and so forth. So for those of you who may not be familiar with it, either online or here, it's a community-based open access DIY facility. It's $150 a month. It's every tool you need to make anything on the planet. We do not assume that you know how to use these tools. And in fact, if you can hurt the tools or can be hurt by the tools, we insist that you take a safety and basic usage class on that tool. So we teach you how to use a laser cutter, a mill, and so forth. We do all kinds of corporate events, lasers and beer, welding and wine, water, jet, and whiskey. 1, 2, 3, boom! What could possibly go wrong? We teach, like I mentioned, hundreds of classes. We got a known good expansion process. We went 24/7 recently in March. We're really happy about that. It was driving us crazy that we were kicking members out of every single location, every single night at midnight, and it just wasn't the right thing to be doing. And so even though it doesn't make any financial sense whatsoever, we said, forget it. We need to be 24/7, and so we are. We're pretty happy with that. And we open Paris in 3 weeks, so we've now got some global reach. Quickly, we have every tool. So machine tools, mills and lathes, computer numerically controlled mills. So I often get asked, what is different today? Why didn't this happen in the 50s or in the 20s and so forth? And there are a range of reasons for that. One is the tool cost used to be very expensive. A typical mill or a lathe would be like $50,000. You add the digital readout, the DRO on it, 15, 20 years ago, those things were $100,000 a pop. So a good lathe was going to run you $150,000. Then the Japanese came in and cut the machine tool cost in half. The Chinese came in and cut the tool cost again by another like 80%. Moore's Law worked on the digital readout, driving that thing down so low, I don't even know what it cost. We're getting lathes for $5,000. 150,000 20 years ago, $5,000 now. That is a massive change that nobody seems to be aware of. It's almost like a Moore's Law type of thing. The CNC machine, though, changes everything. And the way it changes everything is that you no longer have to become a millwright to be able to use a mill or a lathe. You learn how to use the software, you learn how to manipulate the software, you load the code up on that machine, and your job is basically to hover over the big red button in case something goes wrong. And the machine does the rest. Tied to that, again, 5 or 10 years ago, you had to learn this thing called G-code. And G-code, it's like harder than Visual Basic. I'm sorry, it's easier than Visual Basic, easier than C++, harder than Visual Basic. So it still took like 6 months to get good at it, and you had to fly the G-code, and you had to be able to go in there and actually edit it in a text editor. And basically it took 6 months. You really had to know what you're doing or wanted to. That is no longer true. You can now download Fusion, 123 Fusion. You can use 123D Make. You can use all kinds of easy-to-use Tinkercad software programs, run it through another program, and this thing will operate itself. We are routinely teaching people how to use a computer numerically controlled mill in under a week. Under a week. That changes everything. And by the way, this used to be a $250,000 machine, and we're getting it for $20,000. CNC is now being added to a whole bunch of other domains as well. So that's one of the fundamental things that have changed the price point and so forth. So of course we have 3D printers, we have laser cutters. We call this our gateway drug. I'm from San Francisco, so if you're a pusher, I assume we don't have any here, but I am a pusher. I push technology. What you need in a great gateway drug is it's got to be very easy to use, it's got to be extremely powerful, and most importantly, addictive. That's the laser cutter. Whenever somebody says, I want to get involved in the maker movement, but I don't know where to start, this is where we start them. We have people routinely, accidentally launch businesses after taking that one class. And I'll talk about a couple of them today. Of course, we have a complete metal shop. We've got a welding studio, MIG and TIG welding. By the way, this is a great date night. You bring your date and you get all dressed up and play with fire and molten steel. It's an awesome time. We call this our sexy beast. This is a water jet. It cuts through 5 inches thick of anything on the planet. Concrete, titanium, cold steel, cows, pigs, you name it, it cuts it. And it's computer numerically controlled. So we can teach you how to use this in about 3 hours, and you can make granite countertops in the afternoon. Pretty cool tool. Complete woodworking shop, including a computer-controlled woodworking router. So again, you learn how to use the software, and all of a sudden you're an expert woodworker overnight. And we've had a lot of people do that. Of course, a single-cavity injection molding machine, a vacuum form machine. The vacuum form machine is interesting to me. One, it's a very powerful tool that most people aren't aware of. Very quick for prototyping. You get your CNC machine, you get a little foam, cut the foam out, rip through the foam, drop it on this thing, and bang, you've got a little prototype. But here's the weird thing about it. Every time we open a tech shop, the very first thing that gets made is a stormtrooper outfit. There is an enormous pent-up demand in the U.S. for stormtrooper outfits. I don't profess to understand. Software is a key enabler. Autodesk is a huge partner of ours. They've put $15 million into the company. Carl Bass, their CEO, is on our board. He's an observer on our board. Carl is one of the leading lights of the entire maker movement. They've come in, they've actually probably spent $1 billion over the last 6 years buying companies, launching companies and divisions, and investing in 3D printing, which is kind of a non-obvious thing for somebody like Autodesk to do. Our most recent software partner is National Instruments. If you're going to do an Internet of thing, you're going to have to use these tools, LabVIEW and MyRio and MyDAX and so forth. And so we're thrilled to have them on board as well. Of course, complete textiles labs, sewing machines. It turns out this is one of those things where you'd be easy to like skip. It's like, we're going to have a makerspace we don't really need. Sewing machines. Well, you just eliminated wearables. Oops. So it turns out you need all of these tools. And if you're gonna do a motorcycle, you want to do a seat for upholstery. And if you can't do that upholstery, then you have to go downtown somewhere, and you're gonna end up paying a couple grand for somebody to make you that one seat. So the design philosophy for building a tech shop is all the tools so that there's no excuse for not trying to make what it is that you're trying to do. You can't say, oh, rats, I don't have that machine, so I'm going to stop today and then never get back to it. Large project bay, so electric motorcycle, electric cars, urban assault vehicle. 1, 2, 3, boom. Team and group events, I mentioned that. So this is me, I'm pretty proud of this, explaining to Alan Mullally from Ford what a robot is. Yeah, I think he was schooling me fairly quickly. But actually what we're doing is not providing tools. That's not the business we're in. We're not an education platform. That's not the business we're in. We're in the community building business. The objective is to create the largest space attracting the creatives in a city where they can hang out and work together. And once you do that on like a Thursday or a Friday or Saturday night in San Francisco, we have 1,000 members, and the magic number is about 500. You want to get over 500 members because at that point you have enough people showing up that the place takes on a vibe that is absolutely amazing. And so you're like 2 degrees of freedom from success when that's achieved. And our dream consultants will help, they'll introduce you to folks. So on a Saturday afternoon, we will have professors from all the universities in the area will be on site. We'll have folks from IDEO, from Frog Design, from Method, designers, professional designers do this for a living, hanging out, working on their own projects. We'll have hardware and software engineers from, you name it, Facebook, Google, Apple, you name it, they're on site. We'll have world-class artists who are working on a Burning Man project with a sculpture that fires great big huge balls of flame into the air. 1, 2, 3, boom. That's what we're really doing, because when you can when you can energize a community of 500 to 1,000 folks that are trying to make things, and you put them in the same area working on the same kinds of things, all of a sudden you have like a superconductor for knowledge transfer. And so you'll go to one of our dream consultants and say, I'm working on this project and I'm an engineer and I don't understand marketing very well and I'm having a little trouble, what should I do? And he'll go like, talk to Mary, Bob, or Joe. They're right there, they'll help you right now. Or you're having an engineering problem. It's like, Bob just retired from Apple. He just ran their entire, tablet division. Why don't you go him? He's very friendly. That's what happens in every major city. You create this amazing community of people who are helping one another get their projects done. That's the actual business. The tools are interesting. Our mission is to help drive global innovation by engaging, enabling, and empowering people to build their dreams. I won't unpack that today. Safety is the most important thing, so we've built a custom-built RFID badging system. You have to take a class to use a tool. At the end of it, the instructor goes into a module, checks a box that's tied to your RFID badge, and there's a little box with a red and green light on it, and you badge into the machine. It turns from red to green if you had the class. It doesn't change if you haven't had the class, and we will fire you as a customer if you try to use a tool that you're not qualified to use for all the obvious reasons. You don't really want people messing around with welding machines if they haven't had the little class. This is my record, my customer record, and you can see I flunked the carbon fiber class. I blame the catalyst. There was something wrong with the catalyst. We have all kinds of partners, which is kind of cool. GE, DARPA, Autodesk, and so forth. I'll unpack that. So I've already mentioned Autodesk. Here's some things that they've done, right? They've launched an entire consumer division, 123 Design, Make, and Catch. They bought Instructables. They bought Tinkercad. They recently bought a computer-aided manufacturing software company for like $385 million because they understand that this middleware between design and the manufacturing piece is seriously broken, and nobody was making enough investments in the space, so they bought them so that they could actually make the investment. Carl is an amazing guy, and their senior team there is very serious about helping 8-year-olds get into manufacturing. That's their design target, is to try to make the software easy enough that an 8-year-old can use it. Ford funded our Detroit location. This was the first time we started developing our new model. These are very expensive facilities. They're $3.5 million, roughly $3 to $3.5 million to build. It takes about $10 million over 3 to 5 years in service contracts and other things to get it up to where they're self-sustaining. And we don't have that kind of capital. Venture capitalists are not interested in funding us because we don't have a high enough margin. So we're having to do this kind of totally bootstrap with strategic partners like Autodesk and Lowe's and others. So Ford called and said, I want you to open a tech shop in Detroit. And we said no. At the time, Detroit was number 49 on the most creative cities list and dropping like a rock. And then Ford said, no, really, we want you to come to Detroit. It's like, well, great, you're going to have to pay. And they said, okay, which wasn't the answer we were expecting. So sure enough, so Ford funded the Detroit location. Now, they were after three things. They wanted to see an increase in high-quality patentable ideas coming out of their employee base. That was job one. They were looking for a 10 to 15% boost. If they can get a 15% increment of ideas coming out of their existing employee base, that is a really big deal, particularly for a company that's doing $80 billion a year. The next thing they said, if you could, cherry on top would be if a new product idea came out and made it on a car, and I'd like you to engage our research and development community in a deeper way. So results, 18 months after opening, a 100% increase in high quality patentable ideas. That was worth every dime they spent, plus probably 10x. A new product idea is working its way onto the car, and it came out of marketing, which is pretty cool. And the reason it came out of marketing was that they were closer to the customer, understood a particular problem, but it's easy to turn somebody in marketing down. They show up with a little PowerPoint, they go yap, 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 and you go, no, we're not interested, right? When they show up with a prototype that's actually functioning, it's kind of hard to say no. It's like, how did you do that? What right do you have to be innovating in the space? You're not in research and development. You haven't been going to our focus groups, but you turned out to be a really good idea. And so now it's actually in the production process, and we have engaged the research and development community. This has been a tremendous success for Ford Motor Company. It's a 40,000 square foot facility. I recommend visiting it sometime when you get a chance. Fujitsu is our most recent partner. On the hardware side, we've just announced we're opening a Tokyo location with Fujitsu, right in a very high rent district called Roppongi. It's going to be an awesome location. But they funded a trailer, and this has just been a remarkable success. We're taking 8-year-old kids, running them through a 4-hour experience, at the end of which they design and produce their own toy. At 8 years old. And it's so efficient, we can run 1,000 kids through this trailer in a week. So we're working on doing a program with the city of San Francisco, the school district of San Francisco. We're going to run every 7th grader, give them an advanced manufacturing experience this year. I'm really excited about it. 1, 2, 3, boom. Who's next? So DARPA, surprisingly enough, got wind of what we were doing and wanted to help support it. So DARPA and the VA funded our 2 locations kind of on the East Coast. It's DC and Pittsburgh, both beautiful locations. Developers are also, we're helping reposition massive parts of different cities. So San Francisco created an innovation zone as a result of 3 or 4 companies dropping in. We're helping Vornado, the largest real estate developer in the United States, reposition their Crystal City location in DC. And we've helped the File organization and others up in Pittsburgh. These things help create entire zones. It's not just like 20,000 square feet. We're talking square blocks. 3D Systems moved in, the 3D printing company moved in 3 blocks away because TechShop was there. Lemnos Labs, PCH Labs, the 2 first hardware accelerators in the United States opened within 4 blocks because they then had access to tools. Access to tools and community are absolutely fundamental. Who else? ASU is our first educational partner. Mitzi Montoya and Dr. Crow basically said we want to have an innovation facility, and they were building their own. And then Mitzi was on a panel with Jim Newton, our founder, and Jim says we got safety, we got education platform, we're open to the public all the way down to 8 years old, and she's thinking, why should I do this on my own? Why don't we just do it with you? We're now doing that with Washington University. We're working with Youngstown State. We helped Munich open theirs. So there's lots of university partnerships that are evolving. Lots of press. Keep moving, Mark. So here are the current locations. We have 4 under construction. St. Louis is being built. Abu Dhabi, Paris, and Tokyo are actually under construction. We have these in development, ranging from a market assessment all the way up to, money's been pledged and they're going to go open. Our French partner is going to open in Lille, Grenoble, Milan, and Sao Paulo within the next 18 months. Fujitsu is going to open another 4. I don't even have Korea on here. Edmonton just today, I need to move them over here, just committed to moving forward. Our objective is to help 1,000 maker spaces open in the United States. We want to open, over time, upwards of 500 locations. Like every high school is going to have a maker space within the decade. They have to for a wide range of fairly obvious reasons, and it's going to happen. So it's very exciting. So this is what the St. Louis location looks like. We're on the bottom floor there. This is what the Baltimore concept drawing is, and here's the impact. So here's the reason that people are paying us to come to their city. As far as we can tell, in the Bay Area, where we have 3 locations, member companies have launched companies that are worth $12 billion. 2,000 jobs, $200 million in annual salaries. So what happens when you give the creative class or the middle class access to the tools of the Industrial Revolution for the first time in human history? They create jobs. They do all kinds of innovative things. I described this for a journalist. Like I now kind of break the Industrial Revolution and this next one into 2 pieces. There's the pre-2006 when Jim launched TechShop, when if you wanted to do a hardware startup, it was a $500,000 to $1 million experiment to begin with. And then after Jim opened it, this is why I got involved, it became a $5,000 to $10,000 experiment. 2 orders of magnitude cheaper. Like, so historically, the only people who got to innovate were capitalists, were universities, or large institutions, or an amazing entrepreneur that managed to con a bunch of people out of a lot of money. Now, at $5 grand, you can do it yourself. It's like, skip the latte addiction and take a loan out on your car and you can start. Actually, for $5,000, you can now do this 10 times before you actually get into any trouble. And if you haven't learned how to launch a company after 10 attempts, then maybe you should go get a job. Probably as a venture capitalist. So these things, catalyze innovation districts, increase innovation and employee engagement, and help improve educational outcomes. That's actually what's happening. And that's why I'm so passionate about what I'm doing, why my staff is so passionate about what they're doing, and what the maker movement is doing in general. But let's get to the stories, because they're way more fun. So this is Ken Hawthorne on Lightning motorcycle. This is the world's fastest electric motorcycle. It did 218 miles an hour on the Bonneville Salt Flats about 3 years ago. He built the entire thing from the ground up in our Menlo Park location. The carbon fiber fairing, he used bags to do that. The aluminum frame, he used our tube benders to do that. There's no such thing as an electric superbike engine. He built the entire engine from the ground up on the mills and lathes. There's no such thing as a superbike electrical harness, so he had to do that. He was a little over engaged. He could have bought a handlebar, but shoot, while you're in the middle of making everything else, you may as well make your own handlebars. He bought the tires and the wheels, he bought the hand grips, but basically this thing from the ground up was built in our facility. He's now going into production, and I think right now you can go into his store and buy one of these, and it will do 218 miles an hour. This won Pikes Peak this last year. Not only did it beat all the other electric motorcycles, it destroyed the entire field. So this is, it's a professional race, the second oldest in the United States. He finished 20 seconds ahead of the Ducati Monster. When was the last time you saw a professional race and the second place finisher came in 20 seconds later? He had a beer and a massage by the time the Italian came across. 1, 2, 3, boom! That's for you, Ken. And he's building a jetpack. It's like, Andy, what are you doing? He says, look, I was promised a jetpack, and Boeing and General Motors isn't working on it, so I am. And he's got 3D models, and he's working on the fuel, and we all kind of giggle about it. In fact, the NASA guys giggled about it as well when they first met him. I'm going through this deck, and I show them this, and they go, yeah. We do real jetpacks. So then I get to do the tour of our San Jose location, and like a good engineer, he's reverse engineered all the jetpacks that have ever been made in human history, including NASA's jetpacks, which he happened to have in his office that you could see through the windows. So the NASA guys are walking by, and they kind of geek out. All of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, there's astronaut whatever, Bob. There's his suit. There's his jetpack. What in the world is a NASA jetpack doing in this guy's office? At that moment, Andy comes around the corner, all psyched up because of something he was doing on the 3D printer. So they geek out for a while, and then Andy goes, I'm really excited. These 3D printers allow us to do some things with the Venturi effect in nozzles that are just phenomenal. I'm getting 8 times the typical flow from this nozzle than the nozzles that are on this spacesuit because of the ability with 3D printers. And you guys are doing this, right? He's now a consultant to NASA on their jetpack. We've had multiple CubeSats launched, mostly out of San Jose on our Mid-Peninsula location. I love this hack. Oh, let's go back. I love this hack. So you need an antenna, right? And so that is a measuring tape, right? So the measuring tape springs out. So a little pin pops out, and then the measuring tape goes ching, 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 and they've got an antenna. Now that is a nice hack. Hughes Space should try to license that from these guys. Perrin, I ran into him one of our first days in San Francisco. He just lost his job as a copy ad writer for a newspaper. And he's 62, and he says, Mark, I'm never going to work as a copyright ad producer for a newspaper again. Those jobs are going away, so I'm going to remake myself as a jeweler. It's like, well, that's an obvious transition. And sure enough, within 8 months, he takes the laser cutter class, a bunch of other classes, and within 8 months, his stuff was showing up in museum stores in California and then across the United States. He's become fairly successful as a jeweler. Now, what's interesting to me in this platform is that we're enabling lifestyle businesses that haven't typically been able to get funded or experimented with. He had access to the tools for a few $100s, maybe $500 or $600. He was able to experiment with a new career and actually launch it. It's really difficult to do that prior to this kind of platform. Tina is an accidental entrepreneur. She's one of those that took the laser cutter class. She took it on a Wednesday night. And we tell you for pedagogically reasons, once you've taken the class, you need to use the tool within 48 hours, or basically everything we just taught you is going to have to be retaught to you. So she scheduled a time on Friday to come in and use the laser cutter. Thursday, she gets a call from her from an in-law and says, your nephew wants to have you at the birthday party on Saturday. Can you come out? And she says, sure. And are you doing a cupcakes? Whatever. She says, we're doing cupcakes. Give me the names of all the kids. I'll make cupcake toppers for them with their names. And so on Friday, she came in, used the laser cutter to make, Bobby, Jane, Jill, and so forth. Shows up on Saturday morning and gives all the kids the cupcake toppers. And at the end of the day, walks out with $400 in orders, not knowing she was in business. 1, 2, 3, boom. So she still doesn't know she's in business. She just knows she's got $400 in orders. And so that next week, she cuts them all out and ships them off to all of these folks. And then, they start having birthday parties as well. And same thing happened at each of those birthday parties. I've got 3 kids, and one of my kids now has this cupcake topper, so I need 2 more. Oh, and by the way, so-and-so is getting married, and we want to do this. And so about 3 weeks later, she came back, and now she had to do 100, and then she had to do 200, and then she had to do 500, and then she had to buy her own laser cutter, launch an Etsy store, write a book. And so when she got married, she was, by the way, her entire engineering training consisted of becoming a labor organizer. She's a labor organizer. She and her husband are labor organizers. They help unions form. And now she's got this runaway business going, and then she disappeared for 6 months, and then came back, and I said, Tina, where in the world did you go? She says, well, you don't understand, Mark. We never had any money, so we didn't go on a honeymoon, and so I just took my husband on a world tour for 6 months. Good job, honey. David came in, the first time I met him, he was very excited, and he said, Mark, I don't know how to make anything. I've never made anything in my life. He says, well, that's not true. I'm really good at email. I'm a killer at email. And I've been to the Maker Faire, and I want to become a Maker Pro. So I'm going to take every class that you guys have, and I'm going to try to turn myself into a Maker Pro. And he convinced Make Magazine to let him write a series of columns on what that experience was like. It's called Zero to Maker. He's got a book out. It's fabulous. I highly recommend it. And so he took all the classes. 9 months later, he launched an underwater robot company. This is a guy who writes good emails. Took 30 classes, and he and a friend, this is a very successful product. He did a Kickstarter campaign, raised hundreds of thousands of dollars. They've sold 1,500 of them around the globe. They've launched another one. It's called the Trident. We have citizen scientists all over the place. We actually have scientists who are packing these into both poles. Not necessarily like secretly. They'll go out. So, because if you're a scientist and you're in the South Pole, you're fairly dedicated, like by definition. And if you have downtime, they don't let you play with the equipment. Imagine that. You got millions of dollars of equipment and you don't let these guys play with it at night. So they pack their own toys in, and then they go out on the cap and do experiments on the side. 1, 2, 3, boom, that's for you, David. So a remarkable guy. Britt Morin was a Googler. She quit her job. She's going to get married in a couple of months. She came in, took all our classes, like 20 classes in a very short period of time. Then she made everything for her wedding. Everything, like all the envelopes and all the center stuff, and it was, I'm told it was truly remarkable. Actually, so remarkable that the women who attended it said, "I need you to get me a kit to be able to make what you just made. You got to sell me some kits." And so she came back and started making some kits out of it, and then she created a little ecosystem where other women would give her ideas, and they created this whole ecosystem called Brit & Co. She is now considered the Silicon Valley version of Martha Stewart. She just closed a $28 million Series C. 1, 2, 3, boom. Mark is one of my favorite stories. Mark was homeless. He's in the Mission Street, downtown San Francisco. Some guys had come through TechShop and had heard about it. They threw the brochure away. He goes into the trash, pulls the brochure out, reads it, and says, "Wow, this is really cool. I think I want to check it out." At that time, we didn't open until 9, so he came in at 9 o'clock in the next morning, got the free tour, and we had a special running that year. It was, if you'd never been a member, $50 for the 1-month membership, and we'll throw in a free class. So he took the laser cutter class and remade his life off a laser cutter class. What he'd do is he'd come in at 9 o'clock in the morning, he would go into the dumpster, pull out a bunch of materials, go to the laser cutter, cut interesting stuff out of it, go out on the street and sell it. Step and repeat, step and repeat, step and repeat. Then he got so good at the laser cutter that other members started hiring him at $25 to $50 an hour to make stuff for them. And then we eventually hired him as an employee to teach the laser cutter class because he got so good at it. We didn't know he was still living in a homeless shelter. We just knew that he was good with the laser cutter. He then bought his own laser cutter, launched his own business, hired a couple of folks. His family moved back to San Francisco. More importantly, he then formed a 501c3, raises money, goes into the homeless shelters and finds guys like him, sets them up 3 months at a time in a house with a mentor, with food, and they come to TechShop and they learn some skills to either launch a business or go get a job. Mark Roth, homeless to hacker. 1, 2, 3, boom. Yeah, he's been to the White House and everywhere. Max came out. So part of the magic is we're part of an ecosystem that's developed. So Kickstarter and Indiegogo are critical components in the maker movement, in the evolution. So Max came in, learned how to use a laser cutter, took an Arduino class to learn how to do basic electronics. Kind of simulates what a PIC processor might do if you knew how to do a PIC processor, which he didn't and never learned, and built a prototype. And I met him just before he was getting ready to launch his Kickstarter campaign, and I asked him, how much money are you looking for? He said, "I'm looking for $60,000. That is a lot for a Kickstarter campaign, particularly back when he did it. It would have put him in the top 10% of all Kickstarter campaigns. And it's like, "Max, is there any way of getting under $60,000? And he walked me through why it was going to take that, that he needed to be able to get his unit volume up over 500 units in order to be able to afford the engineering required to put it down to a PIC processor, get the lithium-ion battery, and so forth. So he needed 60 grand. So I was a doubter. Yeah. He raised $480,000 and then had a very serious manufacturing problem. He had designed his Gantt process to produce 600, not 4,800. We call that an elegant problem, but it's still a problem, right? You didn't have the cash to be able to fund it until the Kickstarter campaign closed. So he's sitting there for 40 days waiting for the cash to come in so he can fly off to China and get the thing made. Similar kind of story with Anton. The first time I saw Anton, I was actually a little afraid for him. I came in upstairs at TechShop, and we have these high tables so you can stand and get pressure on stuff. He's standing on the table, wrestling a 12-foot piece of corrugated plastic and losing. I mean, he's about ready to fall off. He's kneeling on it and trying to bend it. And so I go over to him and say, Anton, please just be careful. Don't lose sight of what you're doing or where the edge of the table is. And what are you making? And which is always wonderful, because when you ask a maker that, they light up. You're touching their soul, I argue. You reach in and you touch their soul. When you say, what are you making? Their eye, you can see the dopamine release. Eyes get big, and they pour their heart out. And so he looks at me and says, I am making a collapsible kayak. And my instantaneous thought was, that is the stupidest idea I've heard in ages. Why in the world would I want a collapsible kayak? I'm out in the San Francisco Bay, and its one feature is it collapses. That is not what I want. So thankfully he renamed it Oru Kayak, and it doesn't talk about collapsing so much. Same kind of thing. He needed, I think, $40,000 or $80,000 on Kickstarter, raised $450,000 on Kickstarter. Both he and Max, the previous one, have been on Shark Tank. Max doubled the value of his company and had all 5 of the sharks trying to buy his business. Anton also was a successful Shark Tank participant. This one is a good one. I'm going to just do the short version of this. So Michael is making a desktop diamond manufacturing device. Yeah, let me repeat that. A desktop diamond manufacturing device. So that rips a new neural thread in your brain, by the way. Those words have never been put together before. And so I asked Mike, how in the world does it work? He goes, oh, it's easy. It's like, yeah, that's why I have one. But he's crazy, right? At that moment, when he says making a desktop diamond manufacturing device is easy, okay, you're crazy. But is it in a good way or a bad way? And I don't really know. So they say, how does it work? He said, well, you pump 95% hydrogen in this port, 5% methane in that port. You apply an enormous amount of energy, so you get a plasma ball inside of my pressure chamber, and diamonds fall out. Well, I stopped at hydrogen. 95% hydrogen in what appears to be a bomb. 1, 2, 3, boom. I says, when are you going to turn it on? It's like, I'm doing it this weekend. Well, you're doing that at home. Those are the diamonds he's making. He's growing small diamonds in his desktop diamond manufacturing device. I hope De Beers never finds out. Patrick came in and asked, what classes do I need to take to learn how to make an iPad case out of bamboo and bookbinding? 90 days later, he had sold $1 million in product. He didn't know how to use the tools, and 90 days later, he had sold $1 million. He did $4 million in the first year, $10 million in the second, $65 million, I think, is what his current run rate is. He owns a manufacturing facility in San Francisco. He saved a bookbinding business. He called them on a Monday and said, I need 4,000 books bound. And they said, well, I'm sorry, we closed. We closed on Friday. We laid everybody off, and they're gone. He says, well, we'll bring them back. Bring them back, because this is just the first 4,000. I think we're going to do a bunch of them. And sure enough, they hired everybody back. They reopened. And so he saved a bookbinding business. Here's the thing I really love. The President of the United States was one of his users. So when President Obama came to the TechShop location in Pittsburgh, his team had done a good job of prepping him, and he told the Secret Service guy, go get the iPad case. I want to show it to these guys. Like I didn't know he had one of our products. And so sure enough, he's shown it to us, and it's actually one of the early versions of it. So again, what happens when you give the tools of the Industrial Revolution to the creatives? They do a lot of interesting things. But none of the ones I've shown you have actually changed the world. We had a hypothesis early on that there would be some people that will change the world in the process. I'm going to show you a couple. So you've probably heard of Square. James McKelvey was the co-founder. He actually came up with the idea. These are the original 3 prototypes that he did in our Menlo Park facility. Now I'm going to unpack this one. It's an interesting story. So James lost a commission on a project that he was working on because his bank wouldn't let him take American Express cards. And that kind of finally was like the last straw. I'm paying $135 a month for a terminal, and I can't even take cash from my customer. I can't get a transaction because I guess I'm not worthy. I guess that my bank doesn't think I'm worthy enough to be able to do American Express transactions. So he calls a buddy of his, Jack Dorsey, up. It's nice to have buddies like that, who had already done Blogger, sold Blogger, and was at Twitter. So he calls Jack up, who had been an intern for him, actually, on another project. And he says, I got this idea, blah, 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 blah. He says, come on, we'll go talk to the top 10 venture capitalists of the Silicon Valley. So they show up with their PowerPoint, and they do presentations, and these are the top 10, ostensibly the smartest investors on the planet, right? At the end of the presentation, they're asking some questions. Like, Jack, I know you don't have any experience in the banking industry, POS, terminals, and so forth. Does James have, maybe he does? Well, no, he's my buddy. He's a glass blower from St. Louis. They turned him down. They turned him down. This is part of the story that you don't often hear. They turned him down. They said, sorry, we're not interested. Jack, when you do a social thing, let me know. James said, forget that, I'm going to build a prototype. So he comes to TechShop, learns the skills, learns how to use a mill, learns how to use a lathe, learns how to do the injection molding, learns some basic electronics, leverages the community's knowledge, builds a prototype. They're the original 3. They then go back to the VCs, and I love this. Instead of doing a PowerPoint, they just said, give me your American Express card. Right? So they grab their black American Express card, they run it through, they take $50 off the top 10 VCs, and they don't give the money back. It's the first startup I've ever heard of charging the VC for a meeting. Of course, the rest is history. At one point, their COO felt like it was August of 2011 when they were really starting to grow. Bakers were buying these taco trucks, taxi drivers, and others. These people were having to hire people because they could now actually participate in the credit and plastic side of the business. Their estimate is half of all the jobs created in August of 2011, 35,000 of the 70,000 jobs, were directly attributed to this particular product. These guys actually increased the velocity of the money supply in the United States, and they had absolutely no right to do it, which is what you gotta love, right? That's why we're in America. I don't think I do go. So I'll go quickly. This is the world's most efficient data cooling center system. These guys didn't have a right to do that. They took on IBM, Emerson, and others. Eventually won. Emerson had to license the thing because it was so much more efficient than the stuff that they had spent millions of dollars developing. Phil and Bob spent $20,000 over about 2 years and a bunch of their time, and they beat some of the biggest manufacturing folks in the world. This is, I love this one. These guys went through 4 complete prototyping phases inside of 12 weeks. This is, again, when you have access to the tools right now, you just keep on going. You don't ship things off across the world. You don't ask somebody to do the design. You just do it yourself. They iterated 4 functional prototypes, generations, in about 12 weeks, went from 3 engineers to 14, and they raised $1 million from Vinod Khosla inside of that 14 weeks. So this figures out how much fertilizer is in the ground already before the planting season. So you go in, you check it out, and then you only put the right amount of fertilizer down. So it pays itself back on savings, and it reduces the runoff zone, right? The nasty stuff that goes into our lakes and rivers. This was named one of the top 5 agricultural startup companies of the year in 2014. This is BioLite. It charges electronics while you use your camp stove. This is a third world problem, not a first world problem. So if you're in a place where there are rolling brownouts and you can't always charge your electronics, this is actually a very important device. It won an award from Fast Company as the top hardware social company of the year in 2013. Trevor and his team built the world's most efficient drip irrigation system. This also won a top 5 agriculture startup of the year in 2014. Note to self, 2 of the 5 ag startups that were recognized came out of our Menlo Park location. How is that possible? Well, there are a range of reasons, but what that tells me is the pent-up demand for these things, for access to tools, is absolutely enormous. And it's cool. When we open one of these, the first people that show up are these kind of guys. They've been waiting for this kind of access for years. So when we show up, we actually have a pop of amazing projects that come out. And then this is my favorite. This came out of the Stanford D School. It's called Embrace. There we go. Simple idea. There's a polymer pouch that goes in the back here. The problem that it solves is about 500,000 babies die every year from being born 2 weeks too early, living in a place where they can't get to an incubator within an hour. They can't control their hypothalamus. The temperature varies. They either get too hot or too cold, and they die. 500,000 a year. So Jane said, look, we need to extend the golden hour to at least a golden 2 hours. Is there something that we can do? Naganon, the chemist, said, well, there's some new polymers that are out that you can heat to a certain level, and they try to stay at that level. That sounds like black magic to me, but whatever. And so that's what they did. They were at Stanford. They got it up to an hour, so it extended it to 2 hours. And then the end of the semester came, and they graduated. And Stanford wouldn't let them back into the lab to keep working on their project. Well, of course not. They're graduated. Why would you let them back into the lab? There's liability issues. There are other kind of issues. Historically, what that would have meant, particularly in this location with these folks, they would have gotten jobs at Google or Facebook, helping the world improve by moving eyeballs around. Instead, thankfully, TechShop had launched, and they came in, and Naganon was working on some of the tables, and a polymer chemist came over and asked him some probing questions. He's 24 years old. He had just graduated. Naganon, what do you know about this particular form of polymer chemistry? It's everything I learned in the last 60 days. Have you ever scaled anything above a bench? Have you done big bats? Nope, never have. Can I help you? Sure. 4 or 5 weeks later, they come back and they extend it from 1 hour to 4 hours. That's not a threefold increase, because this is a geographic problem, right? You drop it in, and it's actually a 900% increase in efficiency, donated to them by members of the community. This blanket has saved 150,000 babies around the world. 1, 2, 3. Boom. So what happens when you give the middle class access to the tools of the Industrial Revolution for the first time in all of human history? They change themselves, they change their community, and they change the world. And I'll open up for some questions.
How do you identify where you go next?
Somebody calls us and says, I've got $10 million burning a hole in my pocket. I'm not entirely joking. We've found that going out to cities and trying to evangelize this is a complete waste of time, unfortunately. Not a lot of people actually know about the maker movement. It drives me crazy. I'm on the airplane with a manufacturing guy yesterday. It's what do you do? I work at the maker movement. What's that? So what we do is we answer the phone. So Youngstown, Ohio calls and says, no, really, we want to have one. And Coach Tressel wants one, and Congressman Tim Ryan wants it. And we say, well, look, it's going to be $10 million. By the way, you get a lot for that. You get jobs, you get STEM education, you get STEAM education, you get employee engagement, you get all that. But basically, it's a $10 million commitment over 5 years. And we found it is just more efficient to wait until the phone rings, and you saw the list. It's ringing off the hook right now. So that's what it takes. It takes a coalition, and we don't want 10 million from one person. We want it from a university, a city, and 3 major companies and a foundation. Because that builds a coalition of folks that reach deep into the community, which is what we're actually doing, and aggregates the demand and brings them all together. And a 3 to 5 year runway is what it takes to get one of these to where it'll break even and throw a little bit of profit off. So thanks for asking the question. I'll give you $20 later for seeding that.
Yes. Yeah. Hi, Mark. Thank you. That's fantastic. So sometimes an entrepreneur needs not 1, but 20 to 100 prototype units to test market. Can you scale up to, what's the top end scale?
Yeah, it's probably about 100. It depends on the product, but we routinely have people produce 100 of something in a location like this. And this is, again, Kickstarter does a bunch of things for you. Indiegogo does a bunch of things. Besides giving you money, it's actually a market validation in the process. And these people have bought, so they will also tell you the feature set and the order that they want it in. So you actually, the best folks that run these campaigns come up with a great prototype, come up with a campaign, but then they iterate on it during the campaign and modify the kind of the feature set based on actual customer interaction. So it's remarkable. But yeah, you can do 100 of these pretty easily. We leaned into to Patrick. We helped him produce the first 2,000 units.
How do you decide on the technology mix and the tool mix? I noticed you didn't have any electronics fab stuff, right? I didn't notice it.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, so that's a good question. So he asked, how do we settle on the equipment list? We do have an electronics lab, mostly National Instruments stuff, which is kind of cool. This is like the genius of Jim Newton, our founder. He had lost access to these kinds of tools. He was on the Mythbusters season 3. He was teaching a combat robot class at a junior college. How to build a 60-pound robot that fights one another to the death. What a great job that was. But he lost access to the tools, and so what he did was he sat down and came up with this idea of we should do like Kinko's for geeks or 24-hour fitness for geeks. So he sat down with his inventor's notebook and went through every single new product idea in it. There were 200 at the time, and wrote down every single tool that he needed to finish the project, start to end. And that became the minimum set. That was genius. That was absolutely genius, because what that does is that it's like I would not have bought naturally the sewing machines. I just, it's like, come on, why do we need sewing machines? I probably wouldn't have invested much in the woodworking area because everybody's got, those kinds of tools. And I would have been completely wrong. If you want to do wearables, you need that machine. If you're going to do the world's fastest electric motorcycle and not have to wait 3 weeks for a upholstery shop to ship you a seat, you need the sewing machines. So one of the great insights that Jim had was this is the minimum set. And so that's how we did the selection. Yeah, in the yellow, yeah.
You repeatedly mentioned making this available to the middle class.
Yep.
Have you thought about how you could make this available to poor kids?
Yeah.
If you really want to change the world, I think you have to get the way to get it.
Yeah, we work with foundations and other organizations to enable kids that wouldn't have the $150 to be able to come in. We don't have the balance sheet to be able to do that on our own, so we have to leverage again the community and others to do that. So yeah, we run kids camps. We're actually about to launch a campaign specifically to do this for an after-school program.
Are you making any connections with the public schools?
Oh, sure, yeah. Yeah. So public schools are harder, though, because of the transportation issue. So our solution set there is this trailer idea, and we're looking for funders in each of our locations to help fund that activity. The trailer is a great bridging technology until we actually get maker spaces in schools. Good questions. You're here, right? Yeah.
Thanks. So I guess there's a concept in my head because I've done a little bit, I'm an engineering student, but I've done a little bit of business classes, just online classes.
Yeah.
And they say look into barriers for entry, look into what the competitors think. But at the same time, you want to think about the community and not in participatory. The community crowdsourcing all those ideas
Right.
versus computation barriers to entry. Like, how do you resolve that conflict?
Well, so I'm a heretic. Launch. It's going to take you more time to think than it is to launch. And then you let the market tell you what you need to do from there. Like, the paradigms are completely changing now. I created a stage-gated new product development process for a multi-billion-dollar company because that was the right way to do it back then. And the reason you had to do all of this other stuff is because your initial ask is like $1 million. When your initial ask is $1,000, just do it. Launch the thing, get a video, put it on Kickstarter, do it 10 times until you succeed. So Patrick Buckley, when I asked him after he had his first 1,000 units, like, well, how would you describe yourself? He said, I would describe myself as a failed entrepreneur. It's like, Patrick, really? It's like, why? Well, it's because this is my 4th business this year. It was May. And then I ran into a friend of his, and I told him that story, and he says, well, he was lying to you. In the last year, he's tried 12 times. It's like this guy was trying something every single month. So yeah, go ahead. You spend 8 weeks working on a business plan and flying your spreadsheets and so forth. In the meantime, 5 people are going to launch your idea. Everything has changed.
We have one question over here, and then David. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, so I was just wondering, is there a cap on your memberships in these cities? Or is there only so many people that can realistically be a member?
Yeah, theoretically there is. We haven't hit it yet. So at one point we had 1,300 members in San Francisco. It was a little tight, but not a problem. And that was actually before we went 24/7. And that actually solved a lot of our scheduling problems, because the folks that are really focused and really need access to it, they will show up at 2 o'clock in the morning to get access to the tools. Yeah.
I have a question. You were talking about sort of the entrepreneurial aspect of it. It seems like sort of entrepreneurship accelerators like a dime a dozen. I mean, every city has one.
Yep.
Easily. Why is it so much harder to get people to see the value here? Because to start a business, you have to have something, right? I mean,
They're just not aware of it, is my short answer. And by the way, there are only 5 hardware accelerators in the United States right now, and there should be a couple hundred.
Right.
You should have 2 in Nashville alone. I mean, it'll come.
Cindy?
What's your material inventory like? So for example, the polymer example that you showed, that those kinds of things you have in-house?
No, it'd be impossible. Yeah, we'd have to have like a 5 million square foot warehouse. Everything comes through our door. So you buy the stuff somewhere else. You drop ship it. Like, so if you're going to do granite, you don't cart that around. You just have it drop shipped to the back door.
Chris?
What does the relationship look like in cities or regions where there may be existing makerspaces and hackerspaces, either nonprofits or co-ops?
Yeah.
That, have you coexist?
So one of the cool things so far is not a single one of them is closed when we show up into the city, and there are some reasons for that. One is that they're usually focused on a particular area, and they're uber geeks, and sometimes they don't want some of the folks that we've got coming in hanging out with them. So not a single one is closed. We try to build bridges to them, and then as I mentioned, we are going to start licensing our software and our content, and we'll be doing some interesting things on affiliate programs that will help drive revenue to some of the local maker spaces through online classes and so forth. So far, not a single one's closed, and we try to build as much of a relationship as we can. We don't like coming in and being the big gorilla, which is kind of bizarre to me because we only have 8 locations and have a long way to go. It's like, maybe we'll be a big gorilla, but right now we're about this big.
Last question. Sorry.
I just had a question about materials. So people come in, they pay the monthly membership, and then they need steel, they need all the different materials. How does that process work?
So in every city that we go to, our dream consultants and our general manager is tasked with identifying all the local suppliers, negotiating a discount with a lot of them. Most of them will give us a 10% discount. So in San Francisco, you call American Steel up, tell them you're a TechShop member, you want your 10% discount, and you need X drop ship to 926 Howard, and it shows up. And we do that in plastic, we do it in electronics, we do that in carbon fiber, we do it across the board.
So you don't purchase through TechShop, you can either...
No, we don't want to have anything to do with that. It's too much.
Jason?
Are the people who are members, do you see them join for a year and then roll off? And what type of churn are you seeing? Member for life?
They're a member for life. So that's the way we view it. They're a member for life. They'll come in for a month or two. If they have a project, they'll come in and use us. When they don't have a project, they won't use us. So unlike a gym membership, where this is something you have to do in order to stay at a particular level, makers are coming in and coming out all the time. And so I like to describe that, yes, we have, it's like a 12 to 15% churn of people that aren't actually that engaged in making and just kind of got excited once and they came in for a few months and they're gone. We got another like 50% of the folks that are lifetime members, but they're just not here or paying us this month. But they'll be back. They'll be back next year. They'll be back next month. They cycle through. So we're not worried about churn at all. Actually, I'm more concerned about the culture and the satisfaction level than I am about the quote-unquote churn. It's not really a useful metric.
Okay, this is the last.
Is there any concern about intellectual property protection in the spaces or...
Nope. It turns out, yes, of course, Ford Motor Company is a partner, General Electric's a partner, DARPA kind of cares, right? It turns out that landing in a community like this and talking a little bit about your project, even the non-proprietary stuff, upgrades your project every single time. Every one of my members has told me every single time that they've come in, their project has been upgraded in the process. Sometimes their core IP is upgraded in the process, and that's a little negotiation that you do. And can I have that for free? Do you want to become a partner or whatever? So it turns out the IP thing it's a red herring. You can cloak what you're doing in an open space, and nobody will have any idea what it is you're doing. So thank you for asking that question, though. And we've dealt with it at Ford Motor Company, and there are ways of dealing with it in this space. But the real value is exposing your idea to this community, because it can go asymptotic sometimes. Like the blanket, a 900% increase in like 4 weeks. Holy cow.
Okay, so this has been a fantastic talk, Mark.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate you coming, and I've got a little gift here for you to commemorate the occasion.
Thank you very much, Peter. I appreciate it. Yeah.